This audio podcast is available in several places. On YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Castbox, Overcast, etc. Or you can just add the RSS feed to your podcast player or download the MP3 audio file from my website. If you're listening to the podcast, for example on iTunes, I would appreciate a rating and a review. And on YouTube, subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell icon. If you enjoy a podcast episode, a like is always welcome, as are any comments or questions you may have, which you can add in the comment section below each episode, for example on YouTube. Thank you.
Cheers. Although, if people don't like, they're going straight down into Davy Jones's locker, so they better click the like button.
Hello and welcome to the Sim Racing Perspectives podcast for Sunday the 14th of April 2019. I'm your host Davy Jones and I'm delighted today to be joined by Markus Martelius from Grumblo.com. Hello Markus.
Good morning Davy.
Hello Markus, and thank you very much for joining. Now, Markus is passionate about motorsport and sim racing both personally and professionally, but more on this later. Now, as many of the listeners will know, I'm based in Finland and Markus is a Finn, and as many will know, many Finns are passionate about motorsport and sim racing. For example, you have Kimi Räikkönen in Formula 1, you have Mika Häkkinen, former Formula 1 champion, doing a racing comeback this year. He's going to drive Suzuka in August in Japan, and he's now at the 50-year-old flying Finn. Markus Paltala is driving the BMW M6 GT3 in the IMSA Championship. Tony Vilander is driving the Ferrari 488 GT3. Tommi Mäkinen is currently managing Toyota's return to the World Rally Championship. And indeed, the team is managed here in Finland, and I believe the car is also developed here in Finland. A young Finn, Joona Pankkonen, won the Volkswagen Codemasters Dirt Championship last year, 2018. Wreckfest, which is a very popular game now, is developed by Bugbear here in Helsinki. And finally, and I guess more closer to my heart, Gregor Hutu of Team Redline and Dom Doohan is currently working on the user interface for R-Factor 2. And of course, as many will know, Dom Doohan is also involved directly with Studio 397 and R-Factor 2. Markus, your interest in motorsport is due in general to your involvement in the exhaust business. Can you describe that business to us in brief? Because I'm interested because I'm a fan of Race Room racing experience developed by Sector 3 Studios in Sweden, and I've had the guys on the podcast. And Race Room, as I say, is directly backed by Klaus Wohlfahrt, KW Auto in Germany. So I'm interested in your background in the car exhaust business, for example, and then the development into the online. So can you briefly outline what the exhaust business, where it came from and what it's all about?
Sure thing. So safe to say that I have some speed genes in my DNA for sure. 2 years before I was born, my father, who is an automotive engineer, started a business making exhaust manifolds for rally cars mainly. Back in the day, it was the Ford Escort Mark IIs and the Opel Asconas and these type of vehicles that were very popular in both the world stage and the national stages of rallying. And it was a one-man business, a side show, as to say, for him back in the day. But I grew up as the business grew up on the side, and that was sort of my second home was where the exhaust and exhaust manifolds were being made. So also from my mother's side, my uncle was the Finnish rally champion in 1990, if I'm not mistaken on the year. So I guess I got the technical genes from my father's side and some speed genes from my mom's side. So
nice one, yeah.
That's sort of the family tree background here.
Yeah.
But the exhaust business was something that grew over the years. It's still operating here in southwestern Finland near Turku, and called Martelius Exhaust, www.martelius.com.
Okay.
And we employ 9 people producing exhausts both for the street and for racing. We still have a big presence in the historic racing exhaust manifolds and stuff like that. They are very popular in, for example, Germany and Sweden and many other countries where classic rear-wheel drive rally cars are still being used. So in one sense, the core of that business remained around those products of those Escorts and Opels and Volvos and what have you. But of course, it has expanded, and currently we are producing exhausts for American classic cars and muscle cars, and we are very popular with the Honda Civic Type R community worldwide, really, with the three latest generations, making a nasty sounding race type exhaust for the street. So yeah, we are doing on the exhaust side many different things, and very healthy and growing business indeed there.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. And then tell us then about any real world racing experience you have yourself.
So where to begin? My driving career or my driving life started when I was 3 years old. For my birthday, when I turned 3, a few of my uncles were working back in the day in the local car factory that was producing the Saab 900. And the car factory had this little Saab-shaped car that the employees could rent for children to drive. So that was my present for my 3rd birthday, was to get to drive that
Nice one, yeah.
that little Saab for one day.
Yeah.
About 10 or so months later, before I turned 4, I got this car for myself. In Finland, very popular thing back in the day, it was called the Lokari car. Basically, it was a Formula One shaped body, plastic body, on top of a tubular frame, and back in the rear of the car was a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine. So that thing was very popular amongst the children in the 80s and 90s, specifically in the countryside of Finland, and I had one of those, and that I was driving in the yards and in the factory yards and all these places for many years. Then skipping forward, I did some two-wheel stuff in between, and never really competitively anything. But when I turned 18 and I got my license, I took my Honda Civic, which was my first real car, to a track day here locally in Alastaro Circuit, 1 hour away from my home. And that's when I really got hooked in performance driving and specifically the circuit racing stuff. And I kept going to track days for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And in the side, in 2004, I bought a Nissan Silvia S12. That's the sort of ugly duckling of the Nissan Silvia family, the early one, before the S13s and the S14s that are more popular and more known. So basically, me and my father, with the help of a few friends, during the course of 2 years, built that into a full-blown race car to participate in what's called the Road Sport Championship here in Finland. And we put the rear axle from a newer Nissan to improve the geometry, and the engine was the SR20 2-liter turbo from the S14 chassis Nissan Silvia. And it started its life as a race car in 2006 with about 420 horsepower, which was way too much for my driving experience. Actually.
I can imagine,
Yeah, it was a handful to drive, but I managed some good positions with that car. Like my first race weekend in Botniering, I placed 6th and 7th in the heats, I think, if I remember correctly. And I drove that car for about 4 years. Well, exactly 4 years, 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And it evolved into 570 brake horsepower and more than 650 newtons of torque. So it was, back in the day, it was probably the fastest, at least the most powerful one of any circuit racing cars in that category or anything of the sorts here in the national circuits. And the car was very reliable until the end. Then we made some changes to the valve train layout of the engine, and there was a couple of reliability issues. And in the 2009 season, I blew the engine twice, and that sort of put the car back in the garage. We had a good plan on how to make a new engine, and actually I still do have that car and all the parts needed to put it back together.
Yeah.
But looking at the calendar now, it's been almost 10 years that the car hasn't been raced.
Yeah.
But in 2009, I also imported a drift car from Japan. It was a Skyline R33, keeping it in the Nissan family. And I did drifting for fun and a little bit for competition for a couple of years there. In the side, I got involved in a BMW team that was in the Finnish Circuit Racing Championships. The format was like a short or medium length endurance racing. So it was 2 drivers with a driver exchange in between.
Okay.
And did a couple of events with that. And then I pretty much laid low on the competition side until a few years back. It was 5 years since my previous race, and I realized that to keep my competition license, I need to drive something. So I rented this 1.6 liter Civic for a front wheel drive category here, and just drove one race there. So now I haven't been active in real world racing in a couple of years, but I probably have about 30 starts under my belt in real world racing, and a lot of track days and other stuff in there in between.
Wow, it's impressive. You know your stuff, Markus, I must say. Now, first few things that come to my mind. 570 horsepower. That's close to the top end of what the Group B was, isn't it? I mean, those Group B cars were nearly 600 horsepower, and those things were dangerous.
Yes.
And then the Alastaro racecourse, isn't there a Porsche event there every year in August or something?
Yes, actually my race with the Honda Civic in the front wheel drive category was held as a part of that Porsche weekend. We were like a killer class in that competition. So yeah, I've seen that event up close and personal as well.
Ah, cool, because I half thought about visiting one time with a neighbor who has a Porsche, but it never happened in the end. And then finally, the previous episode, I had Rene Butler and Marcel Offermans on from Studio 397. And Rene Butler has the new Honda Civic Type R. And I asked him about it because he posted an image of the car on Twitter. He was driving the car with his girlfriend on the Nordschleife. And I said, well, Rene, what size rims are those on the car? Are they like aftermarket? He said, no. He said, they're 20-inch alloys. And I was like, wow, 20 inch is like massive. And he said, no, that's like factory. So I was fascinated by that because you know you had those narrow profile tires. He said the tires were difficult to source, but it looks really cool. And I believe I've seen many videos on the front wheel drive Honda Civic Type R, and it's proving very popular in reviews and so on. Now, Markus, you mentioned drifting, so I wanted to ask you then about your drifting history. And you told me before that you also used to host a drifting podcast in Finnish. So tell me about that.
Sure. I was very, very passionate about drifting in my younger years.
Yeah.
The D1 Grand Prix in Japan started in year 2000 or 2001. Was their first full championship, and from the very beginning, I was watching that stuff. I had got hooked in the Japanese car scene and the Japanese tuning scene from online videos, even way before YouTube existed. There was a website called Kazaa that I was downloading stuff from as a schoolboy with my friends, and there was some snippets from Option Video and whatnot. So I sort of got the introduction to the drifting culture from that stuff. And when D1 Grand Prix really established itself as a competition format, I was a really big fan from the beginning. And a few years later, the Western world started to adopt drifting as well, and so did some organizers here in Finland. It was really a fashion thing, like everybody wanted to be part of that industry. A little bit like sim racing is now, really.
Indeed.
There's a rising tide with something, and everybody wants to attach themselves to it. Drifting events in Finland, in my opinion, were a little bit, how should I say, unorganized. So the judging criteria wasn't what I was expecting when I was watching the Japanese stuff and sort of understood what they were looking for there. And it was more like a show than a competition, and that didn't sit really well with me. So after a few years, I decided that I have to do something to be involved, and I found a friend who was good with websites and stuff, and we built this website vastaheitto.com, which basically translates into the Scandinavian flick.com. And that was the name of the website, and the forums got pretty popular. All the main drivers were there, and all the organizers were there, and all the fans were there, and things were doing good there, and we were participating in the events and making videos and whatnot. And at some point, I got involved in judging the drift competition as well. Then I got into the organization itself. Was one of the founders of the FPDA, which is the Finnish Pro Drifting Association, a non-profit that was sort of founded with the principal idea of improving the quality of competition and fairness and all these aspects there. So I wrote the first technical rule book of the Finnish drifting, and I was educating the judges on the criteria and showing them the Japan way and the American way, and sort of this experience that I had gained over the course of the years by watching so many videos and so much content. And I had visited the Silverstone circuit in the UK for a D1 exhibition where the Japanese guys came over to show how it's done. Yeah. And I sort of felt like I had something to give, and for a few years I was involved with that stuff. But as always, or often happens with this voluntary work, the thanks are few and far in between, and the work amount that you end up doing is quite a lot. So after about, I would say, 7 or 8 years being really active in organizing the drifting stuff, I sort of pulled out from there. But as part of that website that we were hosting, I did have a drifting podcast myself. We did maybe a dozen or so episodes over the course of one season. Yeah. But that sort of faded away also with my involvement being less and less in the drifting scene. But I'm still very actively following the Japanese and the American scene a little bit as well. And as a sport, drifting has a special place in my heart because of my history with it, really. And having done drifting here in Finland as well, and I took part in the Ebisu Drift Matsuri 1 year in Japan, rented a car there and drove for a little bit with the Japanese guys there. So yeah, I've been around with that sport as well.
Yeah, fascinating. And I will admit that, and I know from personal experience, like doing a thing as a hobby is hard. Keeping it going when you're doing on a voluntary basis, if you will, it's difficult. And I feel like that I won't say apprentice talking to the master, not even close to apprentice. Now I have some notes here because when we chatted earlier, you wanted to ask me about my opinions on drifting and simulation drift competitions, and I have to admit I knew nothing. And indeed, you guys, you sent me links to stuff so I could find out, because well, like I commented to you, I went to Google it and I couldn't find anything. And there was I thinking Google indexes everything. But now one thing I do remember is I remember playing Codemasters Dirt 3 and trying to drift in Ken Block's WRC Ford Focus, and I was using an Xbox pad and trying to use manual gears and getting nowhere. And I remember recently one of the guys I had on the show was Steve Brown Super GT, and Steve did a live stream of the Drive Club on the PlayStation 4, because the Drive Club title is closing down this year. And I remember during the stream that Steve is primarily a Gran Turismo sport YouTuber and streamer, and Steve was trying to drift during the live stream in using Drive Club, and he was finding it very difficult. And now I know I do play Assetto Corsa and Automobilista, for example, from the PC sim racing world, and Assetto Corsa has this Japanese car pack, and it has a drift mode, and there are drifting videos using Assetto Corsa, like Japanese toge style, so they're very popular, of course, and drifting is very popular among the younger guys, especially with the Forza channels and GTA and Gran Turismo and so on. And also there's another title which is very great, I don't know how popular it is, Automobilista from Brazil, and that also has drifting focused content. And one of the things I do know is from Japan, you have Akira Nakai-san, the RWE. I've watched his videos on YouTube, and even yesterday I watched a video where a guy was changing headers and exhausts on a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. I have no clue what I'm looking at, but I'm still watching it, and no doubt you know exactly what it all means. Akira Nakai, he came from the drifting scene, and he's now world famous for modifying Porsches by hand using his body kits and so on. So that was very interesting to watch. Now, I did, thanks to you, find the Virtual Drift Championship, and I'll link to everything I talk about below in the podcast description. And I came across a channel and a website. Now, they seem to use primarily Facebook. This group was founded in 2016, and they use Assetto Corsa. And I was impressed because they're very highly organized. To join, you either need to have a license handed out by them during an online competition day, or you need to have a real drifting license in the real world. And they have a highly organized Facebook page, and they're starting out on YouTube. They have tracks and cars available to download. So I was very, very impressed with that, because you have many, I follow many competitions, motorsport competitions, both in real world and online, for example, both endurance and sprint. And for those ones that are done in either iRacing or Assetto Corsa or sim racing system, they're very highly organized, and I respect the guys for what they're doing, keeping it going. And I link to the Virtual Drift Championship down below in the description. They had 2 videos. It's an early start for them, and they had one from Road Atlanta, I think it was, and another one from New Jersey, and the tracks, I believe, are custom made, so they're doing really good stuff. Now, Markus, I want to continue on with you then, and so can you tell us, when did you get your first sim racing reel, and what gear do you run now?
So that was somewhere in the mid to late 90s. I was playing a lot of car games since I was very little. I think I got the Commodore 64 gaming computer when I was about 6 or so, and that obviously had some racing games, but you can't speak of simulation back in those days. It was very arcade indeed.
Yeah.
But as the PCs developed a little bit, and we always had a decent computer at home, not the best ones, but decent ones. There was a lot of games coming out. Like one of the first proper simulations that I remember having was the Grand Prix 2. I missed out on the first Grand Prix, but the Grand Prix 2, that was, I think, 96 or so.
Yeah.
That might have been one of the first games that you could call simulation that I got really involved with. And as is the case, trying to play with the keyboard, you get really frustrated and you don't get anywhere. So somewhere there in the mid to late 90s, there started to come out these first commercial steering wheel and pedals packages that force feedback didn't even exist back in the days. It was like the rubber band centering system inside, and really flimsy, and a lot of play in the center and all that good stuff.
And easy to break, I can imagine. Easy to break.
Oh yeah, I broke several ones of my first steering wheels. Like I was trying to remember how many years they lasted on average, but not too many at all. But it was still a big improvement from trying to play with the keyboard and stuff. And As a young boy, I was really passionate about cars and racing and all of that stuff. Was following Formula One a lot and the WRC, and I was really into the Group B era of rallying that I had been too little to live in real life. I'm born in '84, the same year as the cars really got wild on the rallies.
That's true.
So I was really into cars and playing a lot of different games during the years. But it was somewhere in '97 or '98, somewhere along there that I got the first wheel.
Yeah.
Can't remember what brand it was. Maybe it was Thrustmaster or something. But it was one of those rubber band type of things. And throughout the years, I got several others, and force feedback came, and at some point there was a Logitech Momo wheel, and
yes,
and that was like a big improvement over the previous ones. Like it was a little bit more sturdy and stuff. But breaking those plastic gears in the first force feedback wheels was like very common thing, because you have to run at least at 100% force feedback, if not 120, so that you get the maximum effect from your wheel. So those wheels, and of course they were clamped into the wooden desk with the pedals in the floor, and you were on an office chair and
sliding around.
Sliding around, moving around, and trying to bring the pedals back when they run away from you. And that era, I wouldn't call it sim racing, because it was just playing and gaming, even if the games were getting better and better. But the experience wasn't really pure because of the equipment, and you were still at your in my case, being a young boy, at my parents' house in the office room in the corner, and the rest of the family is doing their business around the house, and you're not really immersed into the racing experience as is. But it was still a lot of fun, and something I spent a lot of time doing. Then when I got my real car and my driver's license, I sort of didn't play much for several years, because I was just driving in the real world and causing problems in the streets and in the tracks with the real car. And somewhere, I would say 2004 or so, I got the Logitech G25. Now somebody might say that it came 1 year later or 1 year earlier or whatever, but it was a decent piece of kit. It was the first wheel that I had that turned like several rotations on the wheel, so that you didn't get the full steering lock after like 120 degrees to one direction. So that was a big improvement in the realism of trying to drive like saloon car type of things. On the Formula cars, of course, the limited steering motion wasn't a problem, but also it had the H pattern gear shifter and 3 pedals and stuff. So that was something that I used quite a lot during the years. And I found this sim called Live for Speed, and I was racing that quite a bit during those years. Not that much online. I was more of an offline racer. For some reason, I was put off by the online gaming community. I don't know why. Just didn't feel like it was my thing that much. I just wanted to drive when I felt like driving, and I just did it offline against the AI or whatever.
Many, sorry, Markus, many feel that way actually. And that's still the same way today. And for many, it's, I don't want to race online. I might get rammed, or I just literally don't have the time. And if you want to get involved, you can get involved in iRacing, for example, scheduled races, or a league in Assetto Corsa or whatever, but you need time to do it.
Yeah, it's the same as real world racing. Like, you need to be organized, and you need to build your life around that schedule. So I was doing it more for the fun. So I didn't want to invest that much time and involvement into actually taking part in the online racing. But then I actually did drifting quite a lot on the Live for Speed, and there was this tool that allowed you to modify the game so that you could add wheel lock. Because that was very limited in the stock cars. So I found this modding tool. I have not the faintest clue what the name of that tool was, but it basically allowed you to hack all the parameters in the garage when you were adjusting the car. So you could add power and you could add steering angle and modify all of that stuff. So I actually did my one and only YouTube video of me playing a racing game when I was drifting on the Live for Speed. That's the to this date the only YouTube video that I've ever produced of gaming. That was like 2008 or something.
Yeah, right.
2008 or 7 or
that's
something.
when YouTube was really starting. And it's funny that you've been talking and it's had me thinking. For example, like you mentioned the G25 and 320 Logitech, however you say it. You had the G25, the G27. Many people are still using those wheels. Then you have the G29, the G920, the PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 4. And you talk about, for example, wheels braking. I have Thrustmaster gear. I've gone through 3 T300 bases, and I have videos on my channel about errors and fixes, and I get views and comments on them all the time. And I bought a higher end Thrustmaster basis TSPC, and it's used actually. It's a long story, but you talk about like in the early days these plastic cog and gear based systems or these bungee cord based systems braking. I'm literally afraid. If my T300 was working, I'd literally be afraid to, let's say, buy a copy of Dirt Rally 2 and play that, because I literally feel, or maybe I'm too strong or whatever, and I don't even have the forces turned up too high. I'm literally afraid of breaking the wheel. So everything you said, for example, the strength of the gear and online versus offline in terms of sim racing, everything you said is still relevant to this day. And actually, Live for Speed is still going, because I've heard Sean Cole from the Sim Pit talking about news updates for Live for Speed. So Live for Speed is still alive and kicking, so somewhere out there. Markus, do you still play now or actively? And if so, what gear do you have now? If you have any time, what wheel and base are you running now?
So being an entrepreneur and having also a family has sort of stolen my time from that stuff, and I actually sold my G25 a year or so ago.
Oh, really?
I felt like I wasn't getting the satisfaction from gaming anymore with that device, and it just isn't close enough to the real world racing, which is what I truly love. And so I didn't feel like trying to build a new PC setup or trying to invest in new PlayStation games or something. So I just let go of it. And actually, it's funny how things come full circle. Because with Grumblo, my business, I've been talking to a lot of different people around and in the motorsport industry. Yeah. And I found this company was local to our office in Turku, called FoRacer. And Jukka Leskinen, a very knowledgeable guy in the sim racing community here, and also part of organizing some events and what have you. He has this really nice event room with these full-blown motion sims, and he has the good wheels and really high-level pedals with hydraulic forces, and 3 monitors up front curled around you so that you have the good field of vision and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So I went there just to talk with him and to understand how that sort of a business can work, and if there would be some basis for Grumblo to be cooperating with the company who is operating in the sim racing. So me and my marketing man, we walk through the door, and the first thing Jukka says, "Hello and welcome. So let's get racing." And he puts us into the sims, and his main product is rallycross, and he's doing it on Automobilista. He has actually,
of course, yeah.
yeah, he has
Yeah.
modeled the Finnish rallycross circuits
Yes.
with his own team into that software. And he also has a custom-built rallycross car, like a supercar, four-wheel drive, 600 horsepower, with a sequential gearbox on the eye pattern. It's not the paddle shifts, but you have to use your hand to shift the gears
Yes,
on
it's
the
sequential.
shifter
Yeah.
lever.
Mm.
Yes,
Forward and back, basically. Yeah.
forward and back. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he put us out there for like 20 or 30 minutes. And then he basically reset the whole thing and said that now we are racing, and he joined the race himself. And we had a really wonderful race for like 5 or 6 laps on one of the Finnish rallycross circuits. And I never did rallycross in real world myself, so it was like completely new and very immersive experience. And during and after that experience, I sort of started to realize what is the difference between like gaming gear and real sim gear.
Yes.
And I realized myself that for that half an hour that I was in that sim, I was in race car driver mode. I wasn't in gaming
good
mode.
point.
I was like really, really immersed, and the only things on my minds were how to improve the line next time around on that point. And on flag point number 8, you need to start braking a little bit earlier because you messed up the acceleration out of that bend. And you go into this, I don't know what to call it. It's sort of a flow state, or I guess it comes from the evolutionary background that you are running away from the saber-toothed tiger in the Stone Ages, and you need to
fight or flight.
You need to forget about the nonsense and concentrate on doing what you are doing really, really well. And when you are driving a real race car, that's the only mode that you can be in. If you are thinking about it, or if you are thinking about your life or other stuff, you are going to crash or do really, really poorly in that car.
Yeah.
So I realized that was the first time that I got into the real zone of race car driver mode, playing a game when I was in that sim. And it's been a few months now since I visited him, and I've sort of put a goal for myself that I need to have some sort of a sim setup for myself in the near future. But also I only drove on that one sim, on that one rallycross course. So I think I need to test several more setups. If I'm building a race car, all the components that I'm putting in it are based on some sort of an engineering understanding that I have. If I choose a turbo, I choose one that is not too laggy, but it produces enough power, and that is suitable for the displacement and RPMs of my engine, and the type of boost levels that I want to use, and all that stuff. And that's something that I'm really used to operating inside of my brain, like making these kind of choices for gear and equipment that I'm using. Yeah. And I feel that I'm not knowledgeable enough and I'm not experienced enough to make a decision on what kind of gear I should be running. Yeah. So I'm postponing my sim rig investment until I have gathered that experience, and
until the time is right. Yeah.
Yeah, like I need to really feel and understand what's the difference between a belt-driven wheelbase with 12 Newton meters of torque and then a direct drive wheel with 25 or 30 Newton meters of torque, and different pedal setups and all that stuff. Like I need to understand the components that made me go into that race car driver zone. Yeah. Because if I build a sim and then I feel like I'm gaming again, then that's, in my opinion, with my background and my aspirations, that's money wasted, because the only way I want to be sim racing is fully immersed and so that I can on demand get into that zone again. So very, very long answer to your question, but no, I don't have any gear at the moment to be driving on sims at all.
Yeah, but Markus, you've said so many interesting things, and I believe we're recording here, we could talk for hours, because what you've said is kind of the Pandora's box of discussions that are ongoing within the community every day. Like you talked about selling your G25 because you didn't have time and it wasn't really giving you what you wanted, and I completely understand that, because you have the experience of the real world. I mean, I've learned so much about I know nothing about automotive engineering, but I mean, I'm fascinated by Group B, and I'm fascinated by springs and dampers and sway bars and anti-roll bars and exhausts and headers, and I don't really know what any of it means, but I have an idea, and all of that for me has come from sim racing, and I had this, I'm kind of endlessly curious. I just want to know, and I can hear what you're saying is exactly what's the discussion every day. Like people like what do I need, like how far should I go? Do I need belt and gear? Do I need direct drive and so on? And indeed, like there's a guy who works for Sector 3 Studios race room, George Ortner, and George does streaming in his own time. And George is a lovely guy. And he posted a comment, like somebody said, well, George drives a Thrustmaster TSPC racer like I have. And somebody said, well, that's your wheel is nowhere close to my direct drive, and like you get a lot of nonsense online and stuff like that. But it's like, well, as far as I'm concerned, each to his own. And if you want to play Forza or Gran Turismo on a console and you have a gamepad and you're having fun, that's that's great. And if you want to invest in a full motion rig with Husqvarna pedals and a AccuForce or SimuCube or Fanatec Podium direct drive, triple screens and VR, that's great for you. And what you mentioned was interesting, because you're only aware of what's available when you go looking. Because if you do, like you said, you went to Yuka's place in Turku and you tried this out and you say, oh God, no, this is now available. This is closer to what I remember from the real world, because you as a driver with real experience, you know what you're talking about. And indeed, when I started kind of getting into the racing, somebody said to me, I gave somebody a demo with a pad, and he said to me, oh, you need to get a wheel. But at the time, I didn't know about wheels. I didn't know how much they cost. I thought they cost hundreds and hundreds of euros. I literally didn't know. And then I looked into it, and I got Dirt Rally. I've told the story before. I got the first Dirt Rally developed by Paul Coleman, who I've had on the show, and I was driving with a pad, and I said, oh, this is not working, I need to get a wheel. And I got the Logitech Driving Force GT, which is the starter wheel for many people. And then it just kind of went from there. So I feel your pain, so to speak. I know exactly where you're coming from. And back to an earlier point of sim racing on a desk. When I sim race now, I have a metal stand, but I do sit at a desk, and I am in an office chair, and I'm planning to do a video. And the title will be The Saddest Sim Rig You've Ever Seen, because it's a case of, I literally, like you, I have children, I grab time when I can. And, I have a single screen, and my PC isn't the greatest, my screen isn't the greatest, and I use this head tracking thing, but it's enough for me, and I've nothing to go on. I mean, my only experience is last summer, a friend of mine helped me get a quick test drive in a Porsche, which I did a video on because I did a video about classic Porsche. So that was my thing. But for me, that was lots, and I'm only like, it doesn't mean because I don't have any real world experience, it doesn't stop me from being endlessly curious and talking to people like yourself. And whether you be from the real world or from the sim racing world, it's all about sharing information and knowledge and taking everybody's experience into context. And most importantly, it's about having fun and enjoying yourself and getting involved. I think that's the most important thing. And what you did from the drifting world and all the things you've done, that clearly shows that, you've been trying to get involved, trying to learn and try to help and so on. Now, you told me earlier that you had spent 6 months with Gran Turismo 4 preparing for the Nürburgring in 2011. So tell me about that, and then we'll move on to Grumblo.
Sure thing. So just to get back to what you were saying in your previous statement there, I must emphasize that what I was doing in the office desk with the Logitech wheel and with the office chair and with the pedals running away from me, when I was driving Live for Speed and when I was driving Gran Turismo 4 and all these games, that stuff really did translate into the real world. So it is helpful for the real world driving, even if it's not a fully immersive experience. So sort of to set the stage for my Nürburgring story here. So I had been driving in racing for many years at that point already. And I had this wonderful mentor called Esa. His nickname was the Fat Senna. Very large person, didn't look like a race car driver at all. He was actually the manager of one of the competing teams in the Road Sport Championship when I was driving with the Nissan. And I guess he saw some sort of potential in me, and he was very gracious of giving me some tips and advice and encouragement, and we did many track walks together, and he really mentored me a lot when it comes to racing, and he put me into the mindset that circuit racing is an intelligent man's sport, that you shouldn't be limiting yourself by only thinking about the driving ability and stuff, that you can really be learning about the circuits and learning about the technology and all that stuff, that
and strategy and everything else. Yeah.
Everything. But Esa was and still remains a very big fan of the Nürburgring. He had his own car there for many years, and it was a BMW E36 that looked almost stock. It was the M3 model, but
a classic car.
Classic car.
Big time.
But he was kicking some serious ass in Nürburgring with that car.
Yeah.
It had the best three-way adjustable shocks and all the good stuff, but it just looked like a standard M3 on the outside. Yeah. So Esa kept telling me for years and years that you have to come to the Nürburgring and you have to come to the Nürburgring. And finally, in the beginning of 2011, Esa said that, okay, these are the dates that I'm going to the ring, and do you want to come with me? That I will introduce you to all the people, and I will show you the track, and I will tell you where to rent your race car there, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And I had owned the GT4 on my PlayStation for some time, and I had driven the Nürburgring Nordschleife a few times, of course, like everybody, and I knew that it was a very dangerous and daunting circuit. So I made a plan that, okay, I'm going to the Nürburgring, but I have to do at least 2 laps every single day from that point in time where I booked my flights until the day that I actually pack my bags and go to Germany to drive. So I did that for about 6 months. I drove every single day. Some days I drove 2 laps of the Nordschleife. Some days I did 10 laps on the Nordschleife. Yeah. But I really memorized the course, and it was so crucial in me being able to safely and successfully drive those 3 full days at the Nürburgring with the real car, having spent that time with the Gran Turismo simulation. And again, like, driving on a sim, even if you don't have the best gear, and even if the simulation software back in the day was not in the level of the Assetto Corsas and the R-Factor 2s and the Automobilistas of today, you still get a lot of benefit. And that was the case. I really found that valuable. But after 6 months, I didn't touch the Gran Turismo for other 6 months at least afterwards. That burnt me out on that one. But yeah, that was one of those stories.
And you went in 2011, and did you actually drive the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife? I guess you did. What car did you drive? An SS car, or what did you actually do?
No, there was a company called Rent a Race Car or something like that, and I rented a Clio Cup for the first day. It was about 200 horsepower with semi-slicks, very basic front-wheel drive car, but I felt like that's the right level of power to start my real-world Nordschleife experience with. So I drove a couple of days with the Clio, and then I upgraded into a BMW Z4 or Z4, wherever you are in the world, how you want to pronounce that alphabet.
Exactly, yeah.
That was the 3-liter version, about 250, 260 horsepower.
That's a powerful car.
It's a powerful car for the Nordschleife. I had been racing with 570 horsepower previously here in the Finnish tracks, but it's a completely different animal being at such a fast circuit. Like the margin for error doesn't really exist in Nordschleife.
Yeah,
so for somebody who doesn't have real world laps under the belt, that's sort of the power level that you should be aiming for to drive there. You shouldn't be going straight into a Porsche GT3 or something. That's just asking for trouble.
And the Z4, of course, is rear-wheel drive, and that's a powerful car. And it's funny, we've been talking about like sim racing versus real. Like I said, I know so much and I know nothing, but I know about the carousels and the Flugplatz and Dottinger Hörstraight, and for all of us who are into sim racing, and indeed our Factor 2 will be bringing out their laser scan version of the Nürburgring, and everybody wants to know, how that will be. And people were asking, Billy Strange did a stream on Friday, and people were asking, do you think Studio 397 will have 12-hour and 24-hour events, and how is it going to be? And it's like the bucket list for all of us. And for example, like nowadays with the internet, you can learn so much. And I knew, for example, it was built during the late 1920s to provide employment. And during a race event, you could have rain on one end of the track and be dry on the other. So it's like the green hell, I believe they call it. So fascinating. So it maybe perhaps on my bucket list to actually visit there one day. And I may never even drive it, but just to head towards Cologne and maybe have a look at it someday. That'd be interesting for me. Now, I want to talk about Grumblo. So I'm fascinated by Grumblo.com. So Markus, as the founder of Grumblo, and it's a thing that you're actively doing now, can you tell us about how Grumblo started? And also, I always ask people the origin of the name, and give us an overview of what Grumblo is right now, or what services you're offering.
Sure thing. So having been in the industry for all my life, and having been working with the exhaust business and developing these exhaust systems with distinct sound profiles and all that stuff, back about 5 years ago, we were thinking about how to make a global digital business around the unique skill sets that me and my family involved in the business have and possess from our experience. And we came to the realization that there was no online channel or online platform that was only dedicated to pure car sound videos. And that was sort of the very basic idea that we started to build Grumblo around. And there was a lot of software development and figuring out the seed funding and all that stuff to make the site and the service functional. But we went live in the February of 2017 with the platform, and pretty soon it just started the life of its own as a motorsport media platform and motorsport media outlet, because that was just the core of these pure car sound videos that we were producing. It was so easy and effortless to send a camera team into an event and get 30 or 40 or 100 videos, depending on the competition, from all of these cars. So the format that Grumblo is covering motorsports is that we go to all sorts of racing events of all genres around the world, and we make a video of every single driver who participates. So you don't have to be posting, a YouTube compilation video of 20 minutes where you might appear for 15 seconds somewhere in the middle, but you actually get your own 1 minute or so of pure action video when you are participating in an event that Grumblo covers. And we give that content out for completely free of charge for all the drivers and teams to be using as long as that usage takes place in our platform. So that's sort of our model, and I'm really happy that I'm able to provide this service to the drivers and teams, because if something like this existed back in the day when I was actively racing, I would be really thankful for getting this sort of content without having to pay for a camera crew and an editing guy to do the production for me, like specifically. And you asked about the name. Of course, it was 2015, 2016 when we were figuring this stuff out, and most of the .coms were already booked. That made any sort of sense. And I stumbled upon this language of Esperanto, which was many decades ago developed as like a universal language of all nations around the world. And I was leafing through the dictionary of Esperanto and came across Grumblo, and it just sounded phonetically so matching to the raw rumble of a race car or a performance car.
And it's funny, Marcus. And when you were talking about the exhaust business, the Martelius exhausts and the rumbling of a car and the car sounds, and when I heard Grumblo, that's exactly how I saw it in my head, or how I heard it in my head, shall I say?
Yeah. So that's verified then. Actually, in the dictionary, that it means the growl of a wild animal. So, for example, a lion roaring. If you would be describing that in Esperanto, you would use the word Grumblo for that. But that's sort of the brief history of the name. And what else about what we are doing now? So. Fast forward to 2.5 years since we started the platform, we have made 23,000 videos from about 600 different racing events in 40 plus countries. So we have really ramped up the production, and we are present everywhere. And what makes us unique is not only we are covering all genres of racing, like we are in drifting, we are in rallying and hill climbing and drag racing and all that stuff, but we are also covering from up to down. Like we have presence with the WRC events when they fit our schedule, and we have a camera crew available. But then also if there's a important local hill climb in the south of Spain, we are there as well. So we are sort of covering across all genres, and from regional events until the World Championship level events and everything in between. So we are not covering Formula One and all that stuff. Doesn't make any sense. There's enough content everywhere for those events. We did cover the Formula One free testing in Barcelona a few years ago. That was sort of an experimental thing there. But if you are like a national level rally driver or a European Championship level something, or just taking part in regional events in a country that we are operating in, then there's a good chance that Grumblo has a video of you driving. So that's sort of the content side there. As we don't charge any money from the drivers and teams, for our business model, it's really important that the drivers are engaging with our stuff, because that's the way that we generate traffic into our platform. And we came to the realization that the digital marketing skills of these drivers are not up to par with their driving skills. And that's where the Grumblo Drivers program came about. We wanted to make again free of charge for the drivers educational program, where the drivers can actually learn how to engage with their own content and our content and third-party content, how to correctly tag your sponsors in the social media, and how to be as professional as possible, and how to get the maximum engagement with the content you have available. And in the drivers program, we are measuring the success of the drivers with an internal point system that is based on the buzz and activity they are able to generate in our platform. And the drivers who are getting the best scores they actually get real world media and partner and sponsorship opportunities through us. So we have a lot of businesses in different sectors in and around motorsport and completely outside of the motorsport world that want to be involved and visible in the motorsport world in one way or another. And we actually matchmake these companies with the influencers that we can verify that are really moving the needle in the Grumblo drivers program. So that's sort of the me giving back to the racing community again in a way that if it had existed back when I was driving, I would have been interested in taking advantage of something like that, because hunting for sponsors and trying to get these deals fruitful and for them to continue for a meaningful period of years, it's a really, really difficult thing for many of these drivers. They are in motorsport because of their driving skill, but then they find themselves in this situation where they have to develop business skills and they have to develop relationships and they have to be giving value to their sponsors and partners, and it's just really hard for them. So we are trying to help out and in the process, of course, gain a lot of traction and traffic for our own platform as well through the increased activity of the members.
And it's a great idea, and I've had people on the show, I've interviewed people on the show who are creating YouTube videos and streaming, and those are guys who've been involved in the real world and they just couldn't continue doing it, either for they just couldn't afford to do it or family matters or whatever. And from what I can see, you're basically supporting grassroots level, hill climb, point-to-point rally, all the way up, for example, to WRC. And where there are events where people can participate, you guys are there capturing footage. And the people who are involved, it's so expensive to keep a car going in the real world. That's what everybody talks about all the time. And what you're doing is providing a free form of PR, if you will. And all the guys, drivers need to do is get involved, and it's a great idea, and it's really, really wonderful that what you're doing. So for the listeners now who never heard of Grumblo, they can visit grumblo.com and access the content. But is there anything else you would like to, anybody listening now who's involved, who would visit Grumblo, is there anything you'd like to do in terms of how do they get involved inside the site? Do you want them to share videos, or what's the kind of the expectation or the best journey people should take when visiting the site to get involved?
Sure. So, like I said, we have more than 23,000 videos in our platform and in our database. So there is a ton of content, and it's really easy to get lost in there. We do have a search functionality. So if you want to look at Audi Quattro videos, you can search for that. Or then we have a calendar with the recent events we've covered. So you can navigate from there and see if you find a genre or country of event that you find interesting, and go see what kind of content and what kind of drivers and cars were there. Of course, our social media channels, which I will give you the links to share in the description as well, are something that we are promoting the best content that we generate in and around these events. So by following our socials, you can often find links to the most interesting and important events that we have covered. Regarding the sim racing community, we have actually just decided a few weeks ago that we are going to involve sim racing in the Grumblo content side and also the drivers program. I really feel like we should be involved in the esports in a way that we treat the athletes as equals, whether they are high-level sim racing athletes or high-level real-world racing athletes. And I feel like the possibilities of creating content and being interesting in the sim world is even more accessible than it is in the real world, because you don't need the camera crew. Your software is handling all that, and
Indeed,
you have unlimited access to content. And I have noticed that there's like a phenomenon of these YouTube channels that are trying to find their angle on how to be relevant in the sim context, if you may. And it is really, really difficult to be an engaging personality if that's not what you're born with. So
that's a very good point. Yeah,
there are always these outliers, like I suppose Jimmy Broadbent is the man of the moment in the sim racing world now, with the most followers and stuff. If he's 250,000 followers now, he's going to be 1 million followers a year or two from now, and he's going to remain there at the top. But he's a rare case that he has a personality and ability to present himself in this entertaining way. And in the Grumblo Drivers program, we sort of want to remind people that you shouldn't be copycatting the outliers, but you should be doing your own thing, and you should be using your content. And it's fine to be a micro-influencer, that you don't have to aim for 1 million followers. You can have a very meaningful career and very meaningful partners and sponsors by having a reasonable amount of followers and producing quality content and doing all these things online and offline to keep your partners' business goals happening with your input. So we want to invite the sim racing community to take part in Grumblo by uploading their own content, which once again is completely free. They can join the Grumblo Drivers program. No charge there either. There's a simple form that they have to fill, and then they have to upload some content to prove that they are actually a racing driver, not just some dude who wants to get their name on the leaderboard of the drivers program or whatever. But very, very simple process. We actually have a person working for us whose main job is to take care of the drivers and help them with their profiles and place the sponsor logos there and all that stuff. So I will give you the link to the application form for the drivers program. Yeah. And I would really be interested in getting the first sim racing drivers to join the GDP, which is not the gross domestic produce, but the Grumblo Drivers program now in the new lingo that we are using. And it's an evolving process. We are going to develop the program so that it would better work for the sim racers as well, looking for all sorts of feedback and ideas on where we could take that. But I feel there's a lot of potential for crossover between the real world and the sim racing, and we are really excited to be working with all these companies and all these drivers to make these connections and to make racing both online and offline a better place for everybody.
Yeah. And I would encourage people to get involved, and indeed I will try and get involved myself to the best of my ability, because I'm just thinking now, everybody's saying now, if you're active online, you have your social media and your video sources, you shouldn't rely on just one. You shouldn't rely on just YouTube. You shouldn't rely on Twitch. For example, the news came out that the biggest YouTuber, PewDiePie, has now is going to leave Twitch, or he's migrating to this DLive, which is this Bitcoin and blockchain supported system. So he's massive, and he's going there. As somebody said, it's breaking out from the Silicon Valley duopoly, if you will, and he's going there. So that's very interesting. So I would encourage people to take a look and get involved and register there, because like I said, it's important to have your content or have your profile, have your visibility in as many touch points as possible.
And to add on that, I think there is some sort of establishment in the gaming community and esports community in general to be doing these long format stream videos. And for myself, it doesn't matter if it's Formula One or somebody playing a game. Yeah. If I'm not catching it live, I'm not going to go back and watch 1 or 2 or 12 hours of stream in the afterwards. So your streams on YouTube and Twitch and what have you, they are relevant for the moment. But there's a long tail to be had with a shorter format and a slightly bit more produced content, which is the Grumblo style of making a highlight of 1 minute, for example. If you did a race, just take the snips, the best overtakes, the start of the race, a little bit of in-car, a little bit of out-car, and create a little bit of shorter version of content to showcase yourself to the ones who are not yet so immersed into sim racing and are not willing to watch 1.5 hours of stream on YouTube or Twitch to see all your maneuvers and all your stuff, because there is always a bubble, and when you are in the bubble, you don't see the forest from the trees, and you are doing what everybody else is doing. But I encourage everybody to play around with the format of their content and try different approaches, and that can open completely new audiences for them.
Yeah, exactly. And indeed, I'm guilty of what you just said myself, because oftentimes you'll see a stream of a real world event, and maybe they cut it into a 12-hour video, or maybe 2 times 6 hours. And indeed, I've been guilty of watching the start and fast forwarding just to catch the end, or maybe catch the part where it was raining and everybody was aquaplaning, because I literally don't have time. And also back to the thing of if you're looking to create a channel, creating the online content to get views, you're at nothing, because like you said, you need to be doing, you don't want to mimic other people. You need to be yourself. You need to do what you want to do. And indeed, many people have commented on me, and Davy's there doing his own thing, which is true. I mean, I'm interested in my things, and I've said this before. I like to create content that interests me. And I don't have a massive viewership right now, but I'm working on it, and indeed I get very nice comments from people who say they've enjoyed the content, and that's great for me, and that kind of thing keeps me going, so.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be doing what you love doing. If it's not you, then it's not sustainable.
So, Markus, it's been a very fascinating conversation. You have so much information and so much to share, and I really enjoy talking to you. So, before we close then, and I'll let you go and get back to your Sunday morning, is there anything else in the meantime, anything else coming up, any events or anything, campaigns, competitions, or anything coming up on Grumblo.com relating to either the Real World Drivers program or the esports, or what is it that you would like listeners of the show to watch out for coming up in the coming months?
So the drivers program has been in sort of a pre-launch phase now. We have about 140 drivers from 20 different countries as members of the program, but that's all organic. We have when we share the videos with the drivers after the event, we have mentioned that there's a possibility for this. We haven't really been doing much of public marketing of the drivers program at all. So we are going to launch the program for real within this month, and we are going to start generating the educational content for there. So there's going to be a series of videos with different members of the Grumblo team and some outsider superstars who are also going to be generating content about different aspects of digital marketing when it relates to motorsport and building your personal brand and how to be professional and all that stuff. So that's what's coming up next in the drivers program. We have already matched the first drivers with real world sponsors. Really happy for those projects, and you can expect in 2 or 3 weeks time to start seeing the first video productions that we have done with these drivers and with these companies. There's going to be some really interesting and exciting projects that we are going to release in the coming weeks. And content-wise, we are everywhere all the time. So whatever is your genre of interest, you can be pretty sure to find either recent content or something's coming up in the next months about any genre anywhere in the world. So everything is coming up. From the community that is listening to this, I really like connecting with people, and if you are somehow involved in the business of sim racing, whether you are trying to build a career as a professional driver, or you have a business around software or organizing events or making hardware or whatever, I'm really happy to connect with people, for example, in LinkedIn, and just have conversations about where there can be points that we can help each other. Like if you don't talk to people, you never really get the full understanding of possibilities to cooperate. And I've been able to help many people from different businesses and different industries by connecting a client with another client of mine with no interest at all for me in between in a financial way, but just something that I enjoy doing and enjoy connecting with people. So
as do I.
whoever
Yeah.
whoever has anything at all that they would like to discuss when it relates to content and where sim racing is going and career development and marketing and video productions, whatever, I will be really happy to connect on LinkedIn or in any other social medias and have a conversation.
Okay, and I think that encapsulates very well the answer to my question. So we encourage people to visit grumblo.com and get involved, and I'll include the links to everything you've mentioned in the video description. And indeed, I'll also include your LinkedIn profile, Markus, if that's useful for people. And I'd encourage people to, if they have an interest, if they're listening, just to reach out to you and ask a question, because that's what you'd like them to do. So on that note, we'll close. Markus, thanks very much again for joining. It was a very fascinating conversation, and I look perhaps to talking to you again someday.
Thanks, Davy. It was a lot of fun. A lot of topics we didn't even get to touch on. So
indeed,
maybe we need to do a round 2 when I have my sim set up, and or then we'll catch up on the real world at some point, and maybe go do some sim racing somewhere together or something. But yeah. Thanks for doing what you're doing. I really hope that your channel explodes and you get a lot of new followers, because I think you have a good format and you are doing your own thing, and it's very valuable stuff that you do. So I encourage you to keep going and for many years to come.
Oh, let's hope so. Markus, you're very kind. Thank you very much. I appreciate your words, and thank you very much for joining. So until next time, thank you.
Is that the outro music? Do 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 do.